Welcome back to the Bob Pritchard Straight Talking Radio Show. Over the past 5.5, nearly 6 years, we've given you insights into the lives of somewhere around 320 of the world's most interesting business people. We talk about what they do and the challenges that they faced, what makes them special, and we also try to find out what it is that makes them tick. It's extremely difficult to have a successful business these days and to do something unusual. So people who have gone before us and have made a success of it, well, we need to listen to them, because otherwise we'll end up making the same mistakes that they did, and that makes your road to success just that little bit harder. So the aim of this segment is to assist you to overcome challenges, to seize initiatives, and to become highly successful. So if you're sitting at home listening to this, then pay attention, because a hell of a lot of really good information comes out of this segment. My guest today is Dr. Allan Frankel. He graduated second in his class from the UCLA School of Medicine and was elected to the Alpha Omega Alpha Medical Honours Society. And for 3 years, Dr. Frankel was selected by his peers as one of LA Magazine's top internists. He was a clinical professor at the University of California, Los Angeles School of Medicine for 18 years. The Chartscape medical software program used by the UCLA Bauer Cancer Center and the eScript medical software utilized by Kaiser Permanente were both developed by Dr. Frankel. After a distinguished career in traditional medicine, now this is where it gets really interesting. Allan Frankel is one of the world's leading authorities on dosed cannabis medicine. Now, with 35 years of experience in internal medicine, Dr. Frankel applies his knowledge of all aspects of the cannabis plant and its therapeutic value to the treatment of multiple serious medical conditions. Now, it's about here that I've got to say, Allan is my doctor, and I'm taking marijuana tablets, and so far they are working extremely well, and it enabled me to get off a couple of regular drugs that I take that, if you listen to the television commercials against them, are pretty nasty and cause all sorts of problems. So that's all good. Allan, welcome to the Bob Pritchard Radio Show. You are being heard right around the world.
Well, thank you. It's great being on your show. I can't wait to smile off my face.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited for today. Then I start a busy day with patients right at 10 o'clock.
All right. Okay. We'll get on with it. It's really confusing to me. It's not as confusing as it was, but the difference between medical marijuana, the marijuana that people sit around and smoke, and hemp. When you walk along Venice Boulevard, there's 20 shops selling marijuana if you've got anything more than a cold, and you see all these groups of people sitting around outside these shops smoking joints. They should be the healthiest people on the planet, but they don't look like it. So can you just quickly explain the difference between the three things, or more if there's more?
Well, first let's differentiate between hemp-based CBD and cannabis-based CBD.
Right.
Although these plants are in the same genus of plants, they're very, very, very different plants. And theoretically, some still think they're in the same species, but I found it very hard to breed these plants. And at the end of the day, the fiber plant, the hemp plant, was meant for fiber use and making paper, a million goods, fuel, food, and it does have about 1.5% CBD, but it's also missing the decent cannabis plants have about 15%. But the big difference is the entourage effect. Cannabis has hundreds of other cannabinoids, minor cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, plant waxes, and a bunch more. And hemp doesn't. So you just can't make the same medicine out of hemp as you can out of cannabis. And we've done many, many, many small trials with 20 patients at a time where we blind them. They don't know whether they're getting hemp-based CBD or cannabis-based CBD at the same concentration. And there's nobody who feels it's the same. We need to grow more hemp to be used for the right purposes, and we need to grow more cannabis for the right purposes.
Right. Now, I've got the impression that most medical doctors are not enthusiastic about prescribing marijuana. That might be wrong, but it's my impression. So is that because doctors really don't believe in it, or is it because the big drug companies are so far into their pocket that they're brainwashed?
Well, I think it's some of both. There is a lot of doctors, there's a decent number of doctors who are comfortable writing the recommendation to the license for the medical cannabis, but they won't go into any details about dosing because 21 years ago, in a Conant decision in I believe the Ninth Federal Circuit, it became illegal for doctors to give dosing information.
Right.
So that scared a lot of doctors. To me, it seems so silly. I found out about that in 2006, and I just couldn't then, and I can't now, believe that they're going to come and arrest a doctor for giving dosing information and call it aiding and abetting. But doctors also have just a fear of having anything to do with it, even giving somebody the recommendation. I got into a number of issues with the medical board. The medical board, I feel like, is changing, and the mainstream doctor view is changing, but there's still a number of doctors out there that are terrified of it, and they don't believe it has any medical value. I don't think they've read an article on it, but it's changing. And at least in the community that I work in Southern California, the overwhelming majority of my patients come from physicians. Now, sometimes it's not the physician's idea, it's a patient's idea, and they ask the doctor, and they said, yeah, go see Allan. Right. But definitely my main work is in the main medical community. That's where I want to stay.
When you say doctors are not allowed to prescribe doses, is that just for marijuana, or because they prescribe doses of everything every day, don't they?
Yeah, well, it makes no sense. But when you think about 21 years ago when this law was written about dosing, what was there to eat? There was weed and there were some undosed edibles, and there was no way, in my opinion, to have medical cannabis under those circumstances.
Right.
I know some will disagree with this, but to me, medical cannabis is when you as a patient, me as a doctor, and the dispensing store all know how many milligrams of cannabinoids you're taking. That's what's necessary to do it medically, because otherwise, it's not that, I'm not saying people can't get better and feel better by smoking or taking edibles, but as far as using a doctor to be involved with it, what's the point? If you don't know what you're taking, what can the doctor really say?
Sure. So, after having a distinguished career as a medical professional and very successful one, how did you get started in the cannabis industry? You wake up at 2 o'clock one morning and go, aha, I've seen the light. I'm going to become a marijuana specialist. How did it come about?
Well, I woke up about 2 in the morning and I couldn't breathe. And this was 1999. And I was just getting over, I thought, a bronchitis. And I went to my friend who was a pulmonary doc, and he said, you're in heart failure. So he walked me over to the heart doctor, and I had a viral congestive heart failure, cardiomyopathy, and ended up with a bunch of heart biopsies. I was given a fairly short time to live, but I just didn't want to consider a transplant, and I was very depressed. 49, my kids were grown, but still, that's too early. But I just didn't want to do a transplant. And then some friends of mine came over and did a reverse intervention. I had, believe it or not, never used cannabis until I was 49 and I got sick. And 3 months later, my echocardiogram and everything was completely normal. Now, I'm not saying that the cannabis fixed my heart. I don't know what role it played, but I do know that it made me feel a whole lot better, and it turned on my brain again, and I started reading literally thousands of articles in the National Library of Medicine, and I became sold. And when I first started my practice 11 years ago, I thought it was going to be much more sophisticated with some dose medicines back then. But I mean, we really didn't know anything.
Well, I'm really glad you made it, because if you hadn't have made it, I'd still be on those crappy drugs.
Well, this is all it's all about you, Bob.
So, why do you recommend whole plant cannabis medicines versus hemp or laboratory made medicines? Is that simply because of the well, I think you explained it before that it's a totally different ball game, but how do you determine what to recommend?
Well, as far as how to make the medicine out of the plant, I use nature's recipe and just keep all the molecules that are in the plant oil to begin with. I mean, I think it's fairly pompous for me to think that I know better than the last tens of thousands of years on exactly which molecules are important. And every year that goes by, we learn more about the hundreds of terpenes and flavonoids. I mean, yes, it makes it more tasty and more aromatic, but these all have tremendous medical value. And to me, the better we get at extracts, and the more the extracts smell like cannabis, the better we've done. And ideally, if we do an extraction on a particular strain, let's say an OG Kush, which has a scent that a lot of people recognize, the extract should smell like OG Kush. And not because that's cool, but because it should have the same medical values.
When I came in for my consultation, you created or had a special combination of cannabis for me. How do you decide what dosage should be for what type of ailment? How do you make that decision?
Well, if I told you, I'd have to kill you.
So it's a guess.
You know, I mean, there's like everything else in medicine. Of course, part of it is at the end of the day, I think this. But I've been doing dosing for 8 years. And for a number of years, I would have people bring in their extracts and I would watch them dose because it's not legal for me to dose them. And I would mark down the dosage and the response, and the caretaker would take the person home. And we followed up and we did hundreds and hundreds of patients like that. And then finally, about 8 years ago, 7.5 years ago, we had enough CBD strains and with enough ratios, enough different terpene profiles that we started having a whole formulary. And as I continued to practice, if I felt we needed, or if I thought we needed a different extract with a different group of molecules, maybe extracted in a different way, I've been really lucky to be able to work with some collectives that I can say, make this, and tell your chemist to call me. I speak to the chemist, they make it, I take a look at it, and then we see what it's useful for. I mean, there are a number of times we've made extracts long before THCA became a popular deal. We were making the extracts and trying them on people. So that's how we learn.
So do you have, is it sort of a collective of people who specialise in the medical marijuana that all compare notes? And is it like the medical profession where all this research goes in everywhere and everybody compares notes?
I would have to say there's a little bit of that starting, but very little. There's a lot of the medical or the cannabis business is a complicated business, and people, money becomes a very big deal very quickly, so people don't want to share information. Doctors very much avoid dosing. I mean, right. I do feel at times lonely. I would love to have that type of camaraderie with other doctors, and I have a little bit of it, right. But it's just starting. And doctors are going to have to believe somehow, and I'm not sure how our government's going to reassure anybody about cannabis right now, but just reassure that, yeah, you can dose. And right. I mean, when I think about being arrested and then the jury saying, wait, this doctor didn't give any dosing information, that's why he's being, punished. No, he gave lots of dosing information and can't do that.
Right. What I liked about coming to see you is that you spent an hour I mean, a full hour listening to what my symptoms were, etc., before you made any suggestions whatsoever. And usually, if you go to a doctor, you get 10 minutes and they throw a bunch of pills at you, give you a couple of samples, and go away and come back in 3 months. You've got a totally different type of practice. So how do you not succumb to the greed that most doctors seem to succumb to?
I don't know why money has never been. That's why I don't have very much. It's never been number 1, 2, or 3. I mean, when I had my children were young, obviously I needed to make more money.
Yeah.
But it was never my number 1. I mean, my number 1 was, well, other than being a dad and now being my 6th grandchild is on the way, by the way.
Oh, good. Congratulations.
So awesome. But I've always loved practicing medicine. And I think if you end up as a doctor and you are truly very, very empathetic, and I'm not saying that's a blessing and a curse, right, then you're kind of forced to either be miserable and have your patients be miserable, which mostly they are, or you have a good time with it. And Voltaire in 1732 stated, "The art of medicine consists in amusing your patient while nature cures them." I believe that. And I think as doctors we help manage people. But I mean, did I cure you with this? No. But if you're feeling better and you're on less medications, I would consider that a success.
Right. When I walk along the promenade at Venice Beach, apart from being amused, there's a couple of dozen marijuana dispensaries with big signs saying, if you've got any one of these 500 things wrong with you, everything from a cough to an ingrown toenail, come in here, we'll give you a marijuana card and you'll be cured instantly. Is that really all hype and marketing bullshit, or is it really a wonder drug?
Well, I'll tell you, I sometimes get embarrassed when I'm talking to patients or giving talks and go down the list of all the things this does, and it does seem too good to be true, except if you look upon it as critical nutrition.
Right.
And I think these molecules are critical nutrition for us. And just like scurvy coming across, or pellagra, or beriberi, all these other nutritional deficiencies in populations over history, there are tons of very, very sick populations throughout history just because either a piece of an orange or some other, or thiamine or B6. I mean, then CBD and all these other cannabinoids might be essential nutrition. I think they are.
So, are you saying that most things that go wrong with people, I get internally, not a broken leg or something, but most things that go wrong with people are all linked back some way to nutrition?
Well, broken leg is actually linked to nutrition, not just through vitamin D and calcium, but also CBD increases the speed of a healed fracture by 30%. So even with a broken leg, the nutrition is important. I mean, do I think there's cures for everything in nature? I'd have to say I don't know, but I suspect there's a lot more than we're ever taught. And we know things are being destroyed in the Amazon, and I don't think things would be destroyed if it was all useless. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I've become a plant medicine doctor. It doesn't mean I never write a prescription or never prescribe a pill, but it doesn't happen that often.
Right. So, why is it that the medical profession, in the main, and the government seem to be so anti medicinal cannabis?
Well, I would take those two groups separately. The government feels the way it does because they want it for themselves. I mean, the number of cannabis drugs that are coming out and new drugs that will be released, the U.S. federal government has well over 500 patents on cannabis. And sometimes when I want to find a way to do something, I just type into Google, U.S. federal patent cannabis on blah, blah, blah. Right. And then you take that blah, blah, blah and search for it, find out if you can get it retail, and all of a sudden you've got a part of a future patent without violating a patent.
Right.
So the money is 90% of the reason the government is against this, because they want it for themselves, period. And that's why they're actually much more supportive of recreational cannabis than medical. I mean, look what happens in Washington, Oregon, Colorado. As soon as recreational is there, medical dies. And the reason is, it's in large part, I think, doctors' faults. If you don't have a doctor that's pushing the maintenance of medical cannabis, it just goes back to recreational where it was before all of this started, except it's legal. Now, doctors are mostly just fearful of losing their license. There's fear about, I mean, when I first started 11 years ago, the stuff I heard from doctors that liked me. I'm not talking about the ones that might not like me, but that liked me and respected me, that what are you doing wasting your life?
Right.
You're wasting your life, and you're going to get in trouble. So you have to decide if you want to push the envelope. I think you have to be somebody that can be scared. I mean, there was plenty of times, I was scared or didn't sleep, or still, if I hear a siren, I think it's something else. So, there was I had well over 20 undercover cops. So it's fear, but you have to be willing to live with that fear. I think I was lucky that my kids were grown. I was a little bit older. I don't even have a girlfriend, so there's nobody to tell me what not to do. So, there's several doctors that I haven't hired, I've interviewed, that I need. By the way, if there's a good primary care doctor out there, I'm looking for another doc.
Okay.
But they're interested in it, but then their spouse says, well, you crazy? You have 2 young kids. And I get that. So I think the doctors have the fear and the government has the greed.
Is this going to change? Well, let's go back to the comment about where they've legalized recreational marijuana, that medical marijuana use has declined. Is that because people think that because they can smoke pot, that's going to solve their problems without getting more accurate prescription? Whatever.
People don't know. People just don't know. Nationally, or even in Los Angeles County, 15% of people use cannabis on some regular basis. That means 85% don't. So, and the majority of people have tried cannabis at least once in their life, but it was a bad experience. It was high THC. Most people don't want to smoke. They don't want to get stoned. And once people truly understand that they could take a capsule that's dosed, or you have taken a capsule, and I know, I can't remember exactly what I gave you, but we couldn't be public on it, but I know exactly what you're taking, and when you're taking it, and if you're not better, there's a good chance I'd be able to talk to you and make a suggestion to make it better,
right?
Because I've just done this enough. Doctors are just too scared, and what have the vast majority of cannabis doctors been doing? They've just been writing recommendations for $40, and that's been that. There certainly are some very qualified cannabis doctors in the state, but very little dosing, and it's a very small number of cannabis doctors. And it also has to be a cannabis doctor who's willing to, bump up on stuff.
Well, if we see specials on CNN and whatever about how cannabis has worked for all sorts of conditions and stopping seizures and all those sorts of things. So there must be a fairly strong movement, even if it's sort of an underground movement, to get governments and other doctors to change their attitude. Is that so or not?
More so in other countries than the U.S., believe it or not. Europe, we all think that right now they're way ahead of us with cannabis, and even in Israel, where they do a lot of research, their clinical cannabis is a very small program at this point. Right. Ultimately, it's going to be a very big program, and what some countries are doing, which makes all the sense in the world, is to put the medical cannabis that's in a container with capsules or dose sprays in their pharmacies, because they have socialized medicine anyway. Yeah. And then have cafe coffee shops for smoking. And I think that's the way the world should divide this up and just see it as very different.
Where's the United States going with regard to medical marijuana in the next, where do you see it going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I see more states. I mean, we're well over, 35, 38 states have some form. I think that's going to get closer and closer to 50. And I don't know how the feds are going to change the scheduling, because they have to have something very different than what let's call it the organic cannabis market that I'm a part of. So, and they don't want their cannabis medicines that are from GW Pharma. I mean, good company. It's a very good company. But they don't want their medicine to smell like cannabis. Yeah. They don't want to have even a drop of THC in it. So they're stripping out everything else, and you've got CBD or you have THC. And those, to me, it looks like are going to be Schedule 3, and they'll leave the whole plant as Schedule 1. So they have control of it.
So it is, even if it's not as powerful, is just smoking a joint in some way medically healthy or medically good for you?
Well, I think a lot of people get a lot of benefits from smoking, but the people who get benefits from smoking, either they're smoking and they just enjoy the feeling, they enjoy the habit, the break, like having a drink, but this is better for them. And yeah, there are people who use it to help with falling asleep. But when you start getting the pain issues, certainly seizure issues, cancer issues, diabetes, and on and on and on, multiple sclerosis, myasthenia gravis. I mean, there's a lot of things we treat. I don't know how to treat those smoking, because there are certain dosages of different cannabinoids that we found to be useful. Then some people, I mean, if they're able to smoke and they like smoking and it works for them, I'm the last person to disagree. Yeah. I mean, but we have more people, first of all, just don't want to get stoned or smoke, so they need to know what they're taking.
Yeah. And excuse me. It's interesting that my capsules, I take oil in a capsule form, that there's no marijuana odor whatsoever. Well, there doesn't appear to me, to my nose anyway. It's fairly neutral smell.
Well, if you open up the capsule and smell it, it'll have that herbal smell to it. But yeah, it's subtle. But if you open up a capsule with hemp CBD, I mean, it's a very different smell.
Yeah, because I've just got off being overseas for a few weeks and went to a number of countries with sniffer dogs everywhere, and just had it in my luggage and nothing. No, even the sniffer dogs didn't pick it up.
I don't think there's so many drug dogs anymore. I think there's bomb dogs. I mean,
they're bomb dogs.
Imagine with all the trouble TSA is in, they make a big announcement. They found a joint. They found a joint. Does anybody really want that to happen? And do we really want to then involve? I realize there's still some places in this country where that happens, but do we really want resources going to that joint?
It's ridiculous. I agree. So, are all marijuana plants? We hear about these acres of marijuana they're growing everywhere. Can all of those plants be used to create oils that are of some benefit, or is there only certain strains that are effective?
I think we're just getting started, and one of the secrets to the future is better extraction, more complete extraction, and more variety in strains. I mean, we may not know at this point what a new strain might do, but it's going to be different. I mean, it's just no question it'll have some different effects.
Right.
So, and it's not just the strain. It's, have you heated it or using it raw? A lot of variables. When you're growing the plants, if you let them flower under light for an extra week or 10 days, you get different terpene profiles. You'll have a different effect. So just how long you spend flowering the plant will make a difference.
So it needs a lot more research, is what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay. Can you get addicted to medical marijuana?
Well, when the plant comes out of the ground, it doesn't know whether it's going to be used medically or recreational. So
Sure.
can you get addicted to cannabis? The federal government, for a number of years, has published a list of the rates of addiction: cannabis, coffee, alcohol. Cannabis comes in around 5%. Coffee comes in at 20%. So, and I think a lot of this addiction, addiction to me is defined as not smoking once a day or once a week or several times a day, whatever. It's by what it's doing to your life. It's making your life better. And people around you would say, well, we don't like the smell, but you know what? He's much better. Or if your life is in ruin, and then you've got a problem, like with any other drug. But the rate of addiction is very low, even according to our government. And withdrawal symptoms, I think, are virtually non-existent. And when they often claim that these people couldn't sleep as well and they were more agitated for a couple of weeks, that's why they were using the stuff to begin with. So it's not that surprising that if we give up our cannabis, that we feel worse.
I must admit, I wake up in the morning and I can't do without my coffee, but I don't go reaching for your pills. So I guess I'm more addicted to coffee. Is there a role for medical cannabis in the fight against overdoses and deaths from opioids?
Oh, I think that's got to be one of the main things we should be focusing on. First of all, try avoid a lot of the opiate. The one thing that's necessary to have an opiate addiction is an opiate prescription. So the less prescriptions of opiates that we can start with, the better. So if it's post-op pain for 2 days, all right, narcotics, but people need to be switched then to something else, and cannabis would be a fine thing to try.
Right.
Also, with withdrawal, when I see patients, whether they're cancer patients that are using a lot of narcotics and they have real pain, but they still get addicted and they still have withdrawal symptoms, and those are pretty much eliminated if you have usually like a 1-to-1 CBD THC. Withdrawal symptoms from narcotics is much, much easier. So that's not adequate, but it's a start.
Does medical marijuana take a while to assimilate into your system and therefore a while for it to have effect? Or is it, most of these pills that the doctors force on you pretty much have an effect immediately? I'm not necessarily saying always good, but is medical marijuana something that works fairly quickly, or does it take a period of time, or how does so?
Both. For anxiety, the effects of using whole plant CBD come on pretty quickly, often within minutes, literally minutes. For schizophrenic that you're treating with higher doses of CBD, those patients seem to take a couple of weeks.
Right.
And there are just patients with depression that get better very quickly and some that take 3 or 4 weeks. And I'm sure there's different mechanisms, and maybe we have to rely on serotonin enhancement for some of them. But, in general, start low and go slow, but not always so low. If somebody, you have to leave it up to the patient and their own, and assessing as a physician the patient's fear of being stoned is a critical part of the visit. Right. Because if they have no fear of it and they're in a tremendous amount of pain and they don't have to drive, then you're in a position, well, let's go for it. And, if you get this guy a little bit psychoactive, but his pain's gone and he's giggling, that's a better situation. Yeah. You might have the giggling side effect or a little stony side effect, but I don't get a lot of complaints about that.
It seems weird that, doctors are prepared to describe pills that are addictive, and people will take those without giving it a second thought. Yet they're worried about medical marijuana being addictive. That seems to me to be pretty weird. So, for somebody out there who's using traditional medicine and it's not working, or they're having negative side effects, how do they go about talking to you, and how do they get to learn more, and how do we build your business so that you can have the same effect on other people that you're having on me?
Yeah. Well, first checking out my website, greenbridgemed.com. Type in Allan Frankel, you'll find my website. I've got a number of years of blogs there.
Right.
And calling my office for, if you're local, to come in for a visit, or a phone educational consult. We do a lot of those. Or Skype.
Okay, terrific. Allan, thanks very much for speaking with me on the Bob Pritchard Radio Show. That's really interesting, because I think medical marijuana is something that I didn't know much about. My wife put me onto it, and she who must be obeyed is usually right. And I'm really pleased that I met you, and I'm really pleased we came in for that consult. Now, if you're listening to this and you have some concerns about an illness that you've got or the medicines that you're taking, go and talk to Allan, and you go to Greenbridge, Green, Bridge, BRIDGE, med.com. You'll be really pleased that you did. And I'll be back with more of the Bob Pritchard Radio Show on Voice America Business Network after this short break.